All right, students, we are moving right along this year. We're in now Chapter 5, Lesson 1, and this one's called Ratios. So in our green math books, we should be open to 192. So pause and get there, please. Now our learning target today is going to say, I can write ratios. It's nice and short. And at the top of page 192, it gives us some information about what a ratio is. It says in the key idea section, a ratio is a comparison of two quantities. Ratios can be part to whole, or whole to part comparisons. So in our notes, we're going to jot down the word ratio, so that's what this lesson is about. It's our main focus today and in most of this chapter. So a ratio or ratios are a comparison of two or more things. For example, I might compare my classroom, inside my classroom, the boys to the girls. They're a comparison of two or more things. And then the three different ways you can write a ratio, and it doesn't really address this in the book, but I'd like you guys to jot it down still. Sometimes you'll see a ratio that looks like this. Let's, for example, use the numbers 3 and 2. So a ratio can be looking like this, where you have a 3 and then you have a colon and then a 2. We would say 3 to 2. That's one way of writing it. Another way of writing it is to put the 3 and the word 2 in the middle. So we could say a 3 to 2 ratio. And then other times, they'll write it as a fraction with a fraction bar, a 3 to 2 ratio. So you always start with the one on the left when you say it, or the one on the top when you're saying a ratio. And then the three different comparisons that I just read on the top of page 192, we can compare part of something to another part. You can compare part of something to a whole. And then lastly, you can compare whole to a part. So a piece or a part of something versus the whole. So with that, those vocabulary things, we're going to move on to looking at our example 1. Okay, so moving on down here. Example 1 says writing ratios. You have the coins shown, and in the picture over on the right, you can see there's quarters, pennies, and dimes in that picture. They want us to write some specific ratios to compare some of these items. So in order to get this in our notes, we're actually going to draw a little picture of these coins. And to make it simple, if I look, there are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 coins. So you can draw 16 little circles in your journal, or you can do X's and O's, or however you want to do that. But if we take a look, it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 quarters. So I'm just going to use a Q for quarters. Those are my quarters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, next let's see how many pennies we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 it looks like. So maybe I'll use P's for pennies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we've got dimes, and it looks like there are 3 dimes. So that just makes it a little bit easier versus drawing the exact picture that we see. So question A in our notes, it says, write the ratio of pennies to quarters. So I'm going to write pennies to quarters in words. Pennies to quarters. And whatever the first word is has to be the first number that's sitting there. So the pennies has to come first. So if I look, I end up with 6 pennies. So I have to write a 6 first. And you can pick any one of the ways up top to write your ratio. I'm going to use a colon here on this one. I want pennies to quarters, so my other side has to be quarters. And we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 quarters. So a ratio of pennies to quarters would be 6 to 7. Next, for question B, it's asking us to write a ratio of quarters to dimes. So let's write that in words. So again, our quarters, there were 7 of them, but this time the quarters word is first. So I'm going to put the 7 number first. Use my colon. Dimes is second. So if we look, we have 3 dimes. So the ratio of quarters to dimes would be 7 to 3. And the third one, for example 1, write the ratio of dimes to the total number of coins. So we're going to write in words, dimes to total. So dimes has to come first because that word is first. So our 3 is going to be written first for how many dimes we have. And the total. And so the total will be all of the coins put together, including the dimes, the quarters, and the pennies. So we have 7 quarters, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 total coins. So the ratio of dimes to total would be 3 to 16. Even though the dimes is written in the front, you still include the dimes in your total number of coins for that second item. We're done with example 1. Pause the video if you'd like and try the on your owns. Okay, number 1, if you tried the on your owns, is 3 to 6. You can use the word 2 or a colon there. And then number 2, talking about the circle graph, the answer to that one is 5 out of 19 students favor peanuts. Okay, moving right along to example 2. Okay, on example 2, we're looking at page 193 at the top, and it introduces something called a tape diagram. At the very top of the page, it says a tape diagram is a diagram that looks like a segment of tape, and it shows the relationship between 2 quantities. So I'm going to list the words tape diagram before I even read the question, because we're going to be using that today in example 2. The question says, the ratio of your monthly allowance to your friend's monthly allowance is 5 to 3. The monthly allowances total $40. How much is each allowance? So when it says the allowance ratio is 5 to 3, it doesn't mean that one person gets $5 and one person gets $3. That just means for every $5 somebody gets, the other person gets $3. So we're going to use a tape diagram to solve this. So the first thing we'll write down is the important information they give us. They're talking about your monthly allowance versus your friend's monthly allowance. So we're going to put your allowance, and then we're going to put the word to your friend's allowance. And they give us a ratio of your allowance to your friend's allowance, and they say the ratio is 5 to 3. So I'm going to put a 5 on this side, colon, and a 3 on this side. So the 5 represents yours, and the 3 represents your friend's. They also tell us that the total of all the allowance that was earned combined is going to be $40. So that's important to know. So here's how we use a tape diagram. We're going to make a little piece of tape, like a segmented tape. And what we'll do here is we'll chunk this up into how many sections we have. So for this one, I have 5 sections. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I actually made too many sections. So let's go here and erase that and try that one more time. I'm going to put 5 sections. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's my little tape diagram. So I'm going to make 5 sections of a piece of segmented tape, and this is going to represent your allowance. Then your friend's allowance is only 3, so I'm going to make a little piece of segmented tape that has 3 sections. There's 1 and 2 and 3, and then label that for your friend. So 5 here and 3 here. And there's a total of $40. So the first step we're going to do is take the pieces of tape and we're going to add the pieces together. So there were 5 here and there were 3 here. So if I add 5 plus 3, I get 8 sections total. So if I know that the total dollar amount was $40 and I know that there was 8 sections total, I can take 40 and divide by the 8 sections to figure out what each section is going to be worth. So my second step is going to be to take 40 and divide by 8. And 40 divided by 8 gives us 5. So that means that each little section of tape over here is going to be worth $5. So if I know that, I can put in a 5 in each of these little sections. And if I added up all of these 5s, I would get a 40 total. So the next step says the monthly allowance, how much is each allowance? So now I have to figure out, okay, what is my total allowance going to be? And what is my friend's total allowance going to be? So I'm going to add up all my 5s. So I have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So your allowance is going to be a total of $25. And your friend over here has 5, 10, 15. And we are done. So that's how you use a tape diagram in order to solve how much using a ratio. They're very useful when you're trying to deal with ratios. A lot of kids would just take a look at this and say, oh, you get $5 and your friend gets $3. And that wouldn't make sense because we have a total of $40 included. Okay, so we're going to move on to example 3, which also is going to be using a tape diagram. I'm going to do this one again so that we can really understand what a tape diagram does for us. So we'll title this one again, Tape Diagram. So that in our notes, we know on a test where to look if we're asked to make a tape diagram. Example 3 says you separate 42 bulbs of garlic into 2 groups. One is going to be for planting and one is going to be for cooking. You will plant 3 bulbs for every 4 bulbs that you will use for cooking. Each bulb has about 8 cloves. About how many cloves will you plant? So there's lots going on in this question, so let's take some information out. The first thing it says is that there's 42 bulbs of garlic. So 42 total bulbs. And the 2 different ways that we're going to use the bulbs are for planting and cooking. So let's put that over here. We have planting bulbs, 2 cooking bulbs. And it says for every 3 planting bulbs, there are 4 cooking bulbs. So we're going to write that as a ratio, 3:4. So our ratio is 3 planting to 4 cooking. And we have a total of 42 bulbs. And then the last piece of information they give us that's important, they say that 1 bulb equals 8 cloves of garlic. And that's going to be useful at the end of this question. So what we're going to do is draw our tape diagram again. One of the tapes is going to represent the planting and one of them is going to represent cooking. So for my planting tape, I'm going to need 3 sections. So let's make a little tape diagram with 3 sections. There's 1, 2, and 3. And we'll label this plant. We're going to plant these ones. And then our cooking, we have 4. So we're going to make 4 sections and cut that into 4 pieces. And that represents the bulbs that we're going to be cooking. So just like our last one, the first step is to take our tape diagrams and add up how many total sections we have. So we have 3 sections up here and 4 sections up here for a total, if we added, of 10 total sections on our tape diagram. So if I have 7 total sections And if I look up here and I have 42 total bulbs, I can take my number of bulbs and divide by 7 sections to get how much is going to be in each section. So 42 divided by 7 will be 6, which means that there is going to be 6 bulbs in each of my tape section. So I can put a little 6 in each and every one of these boxes. So if we go back to the question, it says about how many cloves will you plant? And each bulb has 8 cloves. Now, if you read the question carefully, it's only asking us about the planting number. So if I look at my planting number, I have 6 plus 6 plus 6, or 6 times 3. 6 times 3 gives us 18. So I'm going to be planting 18 bulbs. And the question asks us about how many cloves will you plant? Well, it told us up here that one bulb has 8 cloves in it. So I'm going to take my 18 bulbs and multiply by my 8 cloves per bulb to get my total number. And that would give me 144 cloves. So this one is going to be our final answer. So again, using our tape diagram to solve. If you want to pause the video and try numbers 3 and 4 on your own at the bottom of 193, go ahead and do that now. So for number 3, yours would be $16 and your friends would be $24. For number 4, you would say fewer. Using this ratio, you will plant 14 bulbs or 112 cloves, which is 32 fewer than originally planted. And that takes us to the end of our ratios lesson.